Come in, Echo 1, this is Command. What's your status? Good. Keep your eye on the prize, remain focused, and this should be over in no time. Just remember the briefing and don't let a single droid through. You know what's at stake if we lose that core. For the love of... Alright, we don't have much time until they're knocking at our door, so I'm going to give you a quick summary. As we speak, Professor Yulp's being escorted through the Galactron stronghold to add his own personal touch on a couple of robots near Galactron's core. These droids will make it through security with no resistance whatsoever, and make short work of said core. Not only shutting down the AI, but the mass production of droids, so we'll feel the results almost immediately. We send them some backup. We need to make sure this plan succeeds, because there is no plan B. Assuming we can hold out long enough for them to safely infiltrate the facility, it'll be smooth sailing once the core's down. Any questions? Try to keep it brief. Don't. We can't afford to lose even a single one of them. It would lead to a chain reaction that will drop all of our turret defense systems, leaving the entire perimeter vulnerable. We would be wiped out in seconds. Considering the geezer's ramblings between numbers, the one he repeated the most was 10 minutes. That's what I'm putting my solar on. Well, you see, we needed the insurance for the professor to make it, and we can't spare anyone else with what we have here. We're spread too thin. Even if we end up being overran, we need that core down. You think these robots will stop at Zork Industries? Yeah, you see, they're far less experienced, so they'll need the help far more than you will. You fought AI before, right? Besides, Post 11 is a bit spacey, good for airstrikes. Okay, fine. We needed someone with the professor to lead them the right way with butterscotch, and now we don't have enough people to have 2 at every post. You're not only experienced with the AI uprising, but you've gotten a reputation from what we hear in the mess hall for holding a position. We knew if we needed someone to fly this alone, you were the only one capable. See, that's the problem. We don't have time or solar to hire more mercenaries, let alone come up with more supplies. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. It'll be too late to hire mercenaries by then, but purchasing gear is a different story. So grab what you can so that you can, well, grab what you can. Sorry to tell you, but it doesn't work like that. I can't make any of your stuff better. But there's one thing I can do. Okay, hold on a second. And done. Well, some good news and some bad news, Echo 1. I can't get you any additional solar. I can't get you any better gear than what's available at the vending machine. What I can do is override the vending machine's purchase limit. You'll be able to have access to everything. That's right. But keep in mind, corporate has a strict rule against fiddling with the machines. Says it can have some adverse effects on the mercs and is highly illegal. But that's because it's usually more paperwork than it's worth. But pulling all this off, I bet they wouldn't ask any questions if a vending machine were to, say, end up being completely annihilated in the aftermath of the fight. I'm not asking anything, Echo 1. I'm simply giving a bit of perspective just before the beginning of the mission. We here at Zork Industries love giving each other different points of view and being mindful of one another. I am simply stating the fact that collateral damage is far more easy to cover in the reports than illegal and/or most underhanded methods that we would not so much as imagine stooping to. Echo 1, we've gotten reports of sightings of the droids approaching the perimeter. You should go address that. 10-4, Echo 1, and good luck. Hello everyone, it's Phoenix, aka Niz, aka No I'm Not Nizstar, please stop asking. Today I'm here with, also I've never met Lil Niz. Today I'm here with a video I'm pretty excited to make. Rise of Galactron solo on hard. But, before I begin the video, I need to address a few things. RoG actually went through the improvements I suggested and then some. There's even some special additions to some turrets. Knives, trinomite, spit, saws, tons of things. The intentions being to make it more possible for certain knots. I also think it spices things up. With that being said, this inclusion also made hard mode, I'm not gonna be around the bush, it made it super easy. So easy in fact, I have a replay from the initial change where I didn't even get pushed out of section 1. I talked to Paraki about this and there are a few tweaks. Only a few, but these changes made the game mode more resemble its previous difficulty. I think one of the most notable changes was the Senya knife turret was toned down a lot, which is good because it was the only single target special turret but absolutely shredded anything it attacked. So that's the version I decided to do my final recording of this video on. You may notice that the recording is going on in the background, despite me saying I wanted to clear things up before I begin the video. Well, that's because this isn't the clip I'll be using for the majority of the video. Turns out, even with the turrets toned down, Raylan holds off the assault so well they barely reach section 3. I was gonna message Paraki about this because it was clearly still too easy, but then I thought about it. And I really thought about it. And after thinking about it, it started becoming more clear, but I had to check for myself. Then I decided to try the mode on hard with several different knots. And I won with most of them. The only ones I couldn't win with were the ones that were limited because they couldn't use certain abilities. But with these changes, it's pretty easy to solo hard mode. That's right, you can solo with Scoop. 2/3 of this man's basic attack power is single target, yet he manages. Mostly because you can brute force it once you get the right upgrades. And he manages so well because there are 2 requirements to brute force this. One is to be able to absorb or avoid high amounts of damage. The second is having a means of sustain that benefits from having several enemies. Having flat shields and limited sustain is a death wish if you're trying to tank. So we end up with this peculiar situation where these guys can't tank nearly as well as these guys.
Why?
My conclusion ended up being sound. It was certainly possible to solo hard with plenty of the other cast, but it was no walk in the park. And that's what made me think that this is the correct difficulty. These were only possible because I knew what to do, when to leave, and what to buy. It was certainly easy for Raylan, but Raylan's the exception, not the rule. Making a judgment of difficulty in a defense mode game as Raylan would be like judging how far the target should be in a firing range map, but basing it solely off of Rocco. I've even judged other knots that strive on Galactron. A majority of them still get pushed back to the converging point in section 3, and even those who don't cannot compete with her in that area. So I thought, if we're judging this by solo play alone, this is definitely balanced. And if you're, say, playing with other people and wanted to make it more difficult, well, you can. In fact, I decided to use some of these methods to make the game more difficult to solo as Raylan. The first thing I thought of was doubling the droid multiplier. This admittedly made it rougher at the start because they shredded turrets faster, but it wasn't much of a change. With all our Pierce and AoE, they still, at the end of the day, took the same amount of time to kill. In fact, killing more droids meant more solar and more experience, so you just scale faster. So I decided to take a different approach. One of turret's worst enemies is explosive gold spamming lodestars. No, I'm not bitter, but since those aren't available, I decided to go for something else. The other worst enemy of turret. Levels. Turret's one of the things in the game that does not scale with levels. Meanwhile, the enemies will be tankier and deal more damage. So I'm going to raise the level from 5 to 20, and see how it goes. You know what, I changed my mind. I'm gonna tone it down a bit from level 5 to level 15. I know I said I would do level 20, and I've tried. I actually have. I even succeeded. I succeeded twice. But I've lost a ton of times between those wins, and I could not to save my life tell you how I won. So I can't tell you any grand strategy because it feels like a stroke of luck. And there's also the problem I wasn't recording at the time of either of those wins. And just like any other human being on Earth, I lie. So I won't ask you to take my word for it, I will pull up one of the replays. And now you might realize why I record the videos live rather than use the replay system. The replay system hates customs. And I really like using the replay system, but there are some pros and cons to it. And I'm not too eager to talk poorly of it, especially considering I haven't fiddled with the replay system this open yet convenient since Halo's Theater mode. So in short, they were challenging wins, but the replay system is too distracting to me and I couldn't really tell you the strategy I did to win in those times compared to how I lost all the others. I want to win using a strategy I know I can reliably repeat, but at the same time, it still has to be an actual challenge, hence 15. With that out of the way, full context has been given, and now we can begin. And first things first, the build. For some characters, Galactron builds are pretty simple because some upgrades just aren't as effective or straight up don't work. For Ayla, it's simple. Buy Solar Crab Burgers, then buy any upgrades that allow you to soak up more damage, boom, enjoy your newfound immortality. For Icht, you pick up Robot Wrecking Ball and then you get Diamond Pickaxe, essentially allowing you to knock them back forever. And after that you get Mining Permit, max out Basic Attack, and after that you pick up Salt Miner, and if you're really feeling like it, you can pick up... Moving on. The problem is it's not that easy with Raylan. Not only does all of her abilities work in this mode, but also all of her upgrades have a purpose here. Yeah, I know, woe is me, basically all the upgrades for both my mains work. And I'll try not to rub it into any Swiggins mains out there.
What's poppycock?
Fortunately though, there are some upgrades that are very clearly superior to others.
What I find funny about this situation is that some upgrades are completely overshadowed or ignored are amazing in this mode. Well, mostly overshadowed or ignored by me when I'm sober. Arguably the best upgrade in the sniper? Oh, you mean iron rifle? The first thing you universally pick up no matter what knot you're playing is Piggy Bank. Piggy Bank's whole gimmick being it narrows your utility build row, but gives you immediate 100 solar. With Piggy's downside being completely negated here, well, yeah. The next super upgrade on the list is no big surprise here, Alien Hand. Being able to pierce with auto attack shots was already important to a lot of Railin players in regular game. In a mode where dozens of enemies are rushing your turret, with absolutely zero sense of self-preservation, well, it just becomes all more important. And yes, since you can't face tank, you're going to notice an ongoing theme of upgrades that take distinct advantage of enemies with zero self-preservation. But we'll be going more over that theme later. For now, a quick lesson of how blinds work on bots. You may have a general idea of how blinds work on droids. Blind was treated poorly in the Awesomenauts community as a form of CC. It would only just mess with your screen a bit, even less so if you had the settings set to low. So this was a form of CC that was countered by a couple clicks on the launch screen. It's been made more effective today and have the same effects on all settings, but other than putting a mark on enemy players, which all CC does may I add, against players it had unpredictable results. Meanwhile, against droids it's a stun. You heard me right, droids will not move or attack when they're hit by a blind. Making blinds oddly useful against droids is a long-term stun. Now, bear in mind that this also has the exact same effect on bots. Just about everything else in Rail and Sniper is nice to have, but Blind Snipe is absolutely essential. With Blind Snipe, not only does Snipe knock enemies back, and it'll stun them for at least 1.5 seconds. Now you may be wondering why I say at least, considering Blind Snipe was nerfed so you can no longer just blind people by pointing snipe at them. Don't worry, I'll get back to that in a bit. In short, this is a really good upgrade and a must-have for the early levels. Can we take a moment to imagine what this mode would be like before the Blind Snipe nerf? Back when Snipe would blind when you're arming the laser at them? That's over double the stun time. This really would have been a cakewalk. Now we can go over to Warhead. As long as you're dropping your rift in good positions, enemies will sit in them compliantly, so having your timer's DPS doubled is nice to say the least. Retro Spaceship, kind of like Alien Hand, will forever be good. It makes it harder to leave Rift, reduces the DPS of enemies inside Rift even further, and makes it even easier to body block them. For example, one of the biggest issues in Galactron is the super droids. They're the main source of damage towards your structures. Super droids can pack a huge punch with their damage, but one of their biggest weaknesses is their attack speed. Super droids attack 0.33 times a second. So, once every 3 seconds. So if you drop a base timer beneath them, it takes about 2.85 times as long for them to complete their animation under its influence. They'll still be reloading after the timer's duration ends in 4 seconds. Now for Retro Spaceship, it looks like a measly 10%, and even I thought it was. Until, well, I stole this equation from TLP, thanks. And if I did the math correctly, which hopefully I did, this will change the difference from 2.85 times longer to complete an animation to 4 times longer, effectively increasing the time slow's potency by 20% per stage, and just like with Warhead, it's a difference that becomes significantly more noticeable the longer the enemies inside of Rift. Enemies dashing through Rift will feel basically no difference, but super droids, ho. Oh, and before I forget, time Rift increases the duration of CCs, such as Blind. So one of the best strategies in this mode is to drop a time Rift behind the enemy, launch up Snipe, and hit them, knocking them back into the time Rift while blinded. That CC lasts longer under time flow's influence, meaning that 1.5, subtracting the time it takes for the enemy to get knocked back into Rift, so let's say 1.25 seconds. Well, that 1.25 becomes the 3.5, which, yes, also exceeds the duration of 4 seconds if we account for the snipe's arming time. So a lot of tactics in this mode would simply improve with the inclusion of a higher time Rift duration. With that in mind, holy crap, it's you! I haven't seen you here in ages! It's great seeing you here again. Battery? Battery! Of course, it was on the tip of my tongue. Man, I can barely believe you're here. So what brings you to the Good Upgrades Club? I'm allowed here, aren't I? Yeah, definitely. I didn't mean it like that. Just, you know, this place is kinda... He was trying to say this place is meant for upgrades people actually buy. Don't listen to Retro. He's here all the time. That's probably his fourth drink. But hey, I think I owe you an apology. You're not around a lot. Hell, you're practically new here. So how about we catch up? Hey Handy, one piano Zurian for my friend here. I don't even work here, but alright. So, back on subject. What brings you here? The only reason I'm here is because it's Rise of Galactron land. Let's face it, I'm not as useful as you guys are. Oh, come on. No, I mean it. That's the reason I'm always forgotten. The only reason people would ever buy me, thank you, assuming they don't buy Higgs Grenade instead and fly one day, is that they already bought you guys. Hey, there's nothing wrong with being complimentary. Look at Twister Lance. Besides, you provide something none of us can. Area denial.
But Higgs
Prolonged area denial. You can keep a push going without interference longer than anyone else. You give Rift more lifetime, and as a result, more presence. And that type of stuff drives people nuts. You're not bad. You're just taken for granted.
Maybe. I don't know anymore.
But hey, you're here now, so let's start enjoying the night while it's young. And if you got any more doubts, just remember you're a base stat booster. So somebody out there's always going to find a way to justify buying you, no matter what.
I guess you're right.
Thanks, Warhead. I needed... Wait, what about Monkey Hand?
You used to love me!
Alright, gloves off, I'm calling the police. Come on, man, he's not hurting nobody. Warhead, it's been 17 patches. I'm not doing this for our sake. I'm now going to talk about 1.21 gigawatt battery. And let me just say, I never thought I'd see the day where I would fully use this upgrade. I don't have the metrics, but I wouldn't be shocked if this was purchased less than humming. It provides more long-term area denial, but most railings focus on the short-term area denial, if at all. It provides a higher maximum for potential diamond damage, but so does attack speed. But it provides it faster, and it still provides more than battery with only one stage. It's so underutilized that I, Niz, the guy with almost 2,000 games as Raylan, someone who made 3 guides on the characters, someone who could name every single other Raylan upgrade with half a glance, I had to look up the name of this upgrade. I had to look up the name of the upgrade, the only one in the set that has 2/3 of its name already in the image. The last time I remember purchasing this upgrade willingly was an act of spite when a friend I was queuing with pointed out it was an underutilized upgrade. I did that as an attempt to prove him wrong. That was at least a year ago, so I guess he was right. And yet here it is, sitting on the top of the tier list. It's arguably the most simple upgrade in the row on paper, other than height. The upgrade's pretty simple. It's 2 seconds on your duration, from 4 to 6. But at the same time, this means you can stun or slow enemies into Rift longer, and it also means there's a significant increase in your maximum damage, along with attack speed. Unlike in PvP, duration pretty much promises to get you more out of your time Rift, because for all purposes, you're basically fighting an army of droids. Okay, now that I've gone over the essentials, I'm going to go over upgrades that are powerful, but not as immediately as important to purchase. Now bear in mind that the ones in yellow might not be rush worthy, but they're still worth getting before you get pushed back to section 2. The ones in orange are generally nice to have, but not essential. Denny's boots are completely pointless in the entirety of section 1, since most of its layout is taking jump pads up or retreating backwards, which isn't an issue because you're not only outrunning enemies, you can get shots when running backwards. This upgrade comes into greater importance when you reach section 2 and need to rush to the front turrets. And then it goes from important to absolutely essential when you get to section 3, where you'll be forced to run back and forth between 2 lanes. Raystone's another one of those upgrades I don't get very often. But to its credit, I still buy it more than battery. This upgrade's really useful because until you get range for your auto attacks, you're likely going to get hit by the occasional super droid when they're firing at turret. And you may be thinking just buy Pierce and Monkey Hand instead of Pierce and Raystone, but Raystone is slightly cheaper, and you can still buy a laser pointer with it. It's also important when you're trying to face tank for your turrets. Remember, you can regenerate. The turrets can't. Skull Bracelet and Ponytail are useful because they increase your damage against everything with basic attacks. Monkey Hand, oh Monkey Hand. I call 1.21 battery an underutilized upgrade. Increased area denial still has its uses. Monkey Hand to me though, is just bad. I could go on a long rant of how bad it is, but fortunately for it, it's actually pretty good in this mode. So I'll let it off easy for now. So let's just say that it had a far fall from grace, from the upgrade of every sniper alien ever to untouched by all. A necessary fall, but a far fall nonetheless. With this upgrade, you can easily hit super droids without getting hit yourself. And from section 2, you can fire at both lanes relatively well. And it also allows you to hit super droids when they're approaching turret, meaning after you snipe them and they unblind and head towards turret, if they're just a sliver of health, you can still very easily finish them off before they reach their range. And every rocket counts. I think it's worth pointing out though that Monkey Hand wouldn't be nearly as useful here if it wasn't for it being synergized so well with Pierce. Geodoll is useful to have because it's cheap and also applies your DPS considerably when you have 2 damage upgrades. Yes, this is me basically admitting that triple damage isn't always the go-to. I'll get to editing one of those 3 guides I was bragging about. But don't let this distract you from the fact that Cat Air Freshener still works despite enemies not counting as Awesomenauts. So it's still great for consistently shredding those clunks and sentries approaching your turret. I wouldn't prioritize it over the upgrades that destroy everything equally in this mode, but it's worth nabbing. Cassette Desk Magazine is especially good along with Laser Pointer as more snipes means more stuns. Sure, it will decrease your DPS somewhat to constantly be sniping, however, just like in the normal game, having snipe up more often doesn't mean you should always use it. The only reason this one isn't overshadowed as it is in PvP is because you'll always be spending the majority of your time behind turret.
I know of a place where you never get harmed. A magical place with magical charms. Indoors, indoors, indoors. Take it away, Penny.
Zap!
And blinding snipes are incredibly powerful. Not to mention that the blinding time is still longer than the arming time, so long as you're not fully arming, and honestly, why would you? And although you have to balance between immediate damage and CC, it's fantastic to have it on demand whenever you see a super droid rolling in. Grick Lubricator is one of those upgrades that won't be very useful until you reach the end of Section 2, and the later parts of Section 3, but still really handy to have, because having more range means you can blind enemies off screen. And doing that to a super droid who has such a slow movement speed in the first place can make all the difference. This could very easily buy you more time to get your time rift off cooldown. Higgs Grenade is probably the most essential upgrade in this category. It's so important in fact that I'll sacrifice Spit Turret in Section 1 to show up with Higgs Grenade in Section 2. So long as you remain in bottom lane, you can cover both lanes in Section 2 and 3. I doubt I need to explain why being able to damage and CC your enemies in both lanes is a huge advantage. HC Bomb won't give you a dramatic lead, but it's really useful having that huge burst of damage after dropping a time rift, which is especially nice if you account for Pierce. This pretty much allows you to execute any low enemies, including that super droid back there that's about to fire off a rocket but has just enough health to survive a normal shot. Power pills are okay. They're basically insurance for when you're trying to body block with Iron Rifle with enemies inside of Rift after your turret was destroyed. Pump Rifle is nice. And oddly enough, it also works here, meaning outside of droids, you get rewarded more for sacrificing DPS to arm a snipe. It's honestly just a little extra on the side. Just like in regular matches, I prefer to ignore it until I'm finished getting my Proto Blaster upgrades. Yes, I know I'm weird. Iron Rifle exists, but it's borderline useless, with the exception of the Rift body blocking example mentioned earlier. But that example comes up so rarely it's barely worth mentioning. And now we get to the upgrades that have very little or no impact to how the game plays out. For the rest of utility row, Medican is useful, but is overshadowed completely by Raystone. Never thought I'd see the day. BKM is pointless, especially if the mode fully works as intended. And flashy glasses are sort of a trade-off here, because you lose your bonus range from Grick Lubricator, but at the same time you get more damage in general. Like in actual matches, this is much more of a preference thing. Are you willing to give up that range for more damage? But at least for me, it's even less worth it here because you're going to hit anything within range, so why not just go for the extra range? Especially when you're relying on it for the stun rather than damage. I mean, look at these upgrades, I already have enough damage. And now that we're done talking about the glasses and the mammoth, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Humming is the only upgrade in this category I would still recommend and buy myself. But you probably already knew that based on the fact that he's on the top of lists of deities I worship. But at least hear me out, please. Humming might not body block nearly as well here, but he still has the potential with max slow, and more importantly, Humming will draw Super Droid aggro. And since Super Droids take an incredibly long time to fire, even though Humming will die to the first rocket, every single Super Droid will fire the rocket to Humming. Meaning if you put Super Droid just out of range from the turret, you just ended up delaying an entire Super Droid assault. And remember, every rocket counts.
You are who you choose to be.
Humming might not be laser pointer powerful, but the little guy still has a hell of an impact. The only reason he's down here with the oranges is that Maxes will sometimes shove him in front of turret, making the sacrifice more or less pointless. Max is by far my most despised enemy in Rise of Galactron, but now with all the items and uses covered, I'll now go over the methods of pulling this off. It almost goes without saying, no matter what your strategy is, no matter what you rush as Raylan, you get Alien Hand. The damage potential from buying it is just way too good to pass up. Oh, and also get Piggy, because yeah. What I usually go for here is Laser Pointer, but you could get away with buying a stage of attack speed or duration instead. Just don't hold off on blind for too long. Unlike in easy mode where the droids spawn in 30 seconds, droids will spawn in the 15-second mark. Droids will spawn in before enemy Awesomenauts, and they're relatively easy to kite other than Humming. Unless you get out of range or straight up negate all the damage, you're not escaping 3600 homing. Those are Broke Star patch level heat-seeking missiles. But yeah, it's fairly easy to kite them and keep them from attacking turret until 45 seconds. On the 45-second mark, an army of Nauts will charge your position and they will siege the turret. I personally like to make sure I have snipe off cooldown when they spawn so I can buy myself a bit more time by pushing them all back and blinding them. Once they reach a turret, it's less about keeping the turret alive and more about killing as many as possible before they reach the next turret, because these droids will shred through the first lane. One bad habit I developed here was firing off the rifts point blank. But in general, you want to have a small gap between rift and turret so that the enemies pushing against it are still affected by the time slow and giving your timer more space to cover. Effectively, indirectly increases your range in this regard. Good news is this is far less of an issue when considering, yes, as said before, the enemies have less regard for their self-preservation, but this still leads to missing out on damaging the maxes in the back. The good news is you immediately draw aggro on maxes when you leave turret, so if you just jump out for a second and jump back in, the maxes will run straight into turret just like the other enemies, which is really good because they're the only reason you really have to angle your shots when you're firing through turret. Now that they can be effectively dealt with through rift, attention can be focused on the droids. Now there are two great times to snipe. One is when super droids are approaching and you need to knock them back and stun them, and the other is very, very important for early game. You're likely not going to get all the kills, so there'll be plenty of solar lying on the ground. But not only is getting that close to turret dangerous, there's no way you're going to be able to push past all the enemy nods. So blind snipe has one additional use. You can knock back the enemies, stun them, and easily grab the solar without being touched. Bear in mind, you can fairly easily reach max build before the 10-minute mark, but the more you can get out of each visit from the shop, the better. One thing about Section 1 you should really take advantage of is how easy it is to navigate. I personally prefer sometimes stopping the droids from even reaching the turret by going down to lower sections and bullying them. Since they take longer to attack and are significantly slower, their delays matter a lot more. The final turret of Section 1 is certainly worth talking about in my opinion, because it's certainly an enigma. It's the best turret in Section 1, and if it weren't for Saw Turret, it'd be the best turret period, in the realms of damage. It has NOS spit instead of an AoE dot, meaning if you can keep the front line clear enough for the spit to spread out, it can hit a lot of enemies before they even reach turret. And even when the spit is point blank because the turret's pushed in, it does considerably more damage than most other turrets considering it's multi-target. It's a really great damage dealer, but at the same time, it's the turret I always end up abandoning before I go to shop. Not just because Section 2 is coming up and I want a head start, but if you stay back for the last Section 1 turret, you're going to have a hard time navigating around the enemy just to get to the shop orb. And to mention the biggest weakness of the spit turret, it's incredibly fragile. Once the super droid starts giving mean looks to your spit turret, just pack it in, it's over. Before you start making your way to Section 2, you really need to have height and boots. And it definitely helps in this mode to find strategies for every section of the map, and it especially rings true in Section 2. One really useful tactic is when dropping a rift below enemies is to snipe above. All the knockback will be vertical as to not knock them out of rift. This will allow you to get the full blind rift duration effect. But I implore you to be careful when proccing knockbacks on freeze frame. I think there's something about knockbacks and a specific angle that causes maxes to activate their slow-mo shot immediately after in response. Slow-mo shots activate randomly from them every now and then, but I've noticed an abundance of it in this section, as well as when they get hit by energy balls from the final turret in the map, which is the red-headed stepchild of turrets, because it deals amazing AoE damage and deals knockback, but only works at an incredibly specific range and has a tendency of, after the turret's being destroyed, knocking the enemy straight into your base. Why'd I bring this up just now? Well, that's because it was relevant because I brought it up just now, and I bring it up now because you don't actually see this turret in action. And that's because a pretty consistent, decent strategy will only have you push back to the saw blade turret but no farther, which I think is for the best because energy ball turret is just way too unpredictable with its knockback. But yeah, the slow-mo shot. With time slows being your worst enemy, being caught in a slow-mo shot mid-snipe is uncomfortable. So hey, at least BKM has a use here. For Raylan, your main strategy is to focus on the bottom row over the top. Not only because of Rift, but sometimes when top turret's down but the bottom turret right below it is still alive, the droid's pathing tends to glitch out. And boy is that handy. It's less reliable for the back top turret because sometimes the super droids will drop down either way, but it's still useful. You might have noticed a trend because here's yet another strategy that takes advantage of the droid's pathing and or targeting system. For the super droids that are on top lane, jump above. You can't jump high enough to get from bottom to top, but you can jump high enough to get their attention. And this is the peak of your height where there's a little pause before you drop down. So what usually happens is you jump up, the super droid sees you, aims a rocket at you, and you drop down, and the super droid fires off a rocket. And the homing and range are just not enough for it to reach you once you reach the bottom. So the only way for the rocket to hit you is if you're a good sport and jump a second time. Once pushed back to the back turret, it's best to prioritize the rift in the back. This is because they have to take the jump pad up or drop down. And in this situation, you want to get in as much time rift as possible. Once you lose the final turret of section 2, You hold out for about 5 seconds, assuming of course you have Rift and Snipe available. If you do, drop a Rift right in front of you, body block with Snipe, and blind the entire group. Once you get the max time, head to shop, buy more equipment. You should be able to get about everything at this point. Then rush to the bottom lane of section 3. Just before, go to bomb so you're capable of damaging both lanes. It is worth noting it's pretty hard to tell where the enemy are at without jumping, but you can just barely see their boots, treads, or jets in Super Droid's case. Unfortunately, for a lot of situations when the turrets line up, you can guess exactly where the enemy are from where the enemy are in the bottom lane. While for the two subsections, the front and back turrets are both fairly sturdy, all the turrets in the middle, from my experience, are rather fragile. This section's a bit rough because you have to navigate between defending top and defending bottom. You have to do it far less as Raylan, but bear in mind, with Time Rift you can only deal with the Awesomenauts or the Super Droids. You can't deal with both. Sure, you can swap between each rift, but you can't hit them with basic attacks or snipes. And don't forget the fact that you can't touch the enemy maxes at all in this position. At some point, you're gonna have to go up there and deal with them manually. What usually happens is you deal with bottom, then you rush over and lose top, then you lose another top turret because they're snowballing. You should generally be able to stop them around the third turret. Once you're done with that, you have to rush to bottom because they destroyed your bottom turret and destroyed the second bottom turret. You go back and forth until you're only dealing with the two final turrets in the subsection. These turrets are fairly sturdy, the top one especially. Although that just might be me giving it too much credit and it's just getting more focus on Time Rift no matter what lane I'm in. In general, these turrets feel sturdier and you have to run around a lot less between them. Once the bottom turret gives out, I give less focus to the top turret until I eventually abandon it. Saw Blade turret does some pretty notable damage to the enemy, and it's definitely worth keeping as intact as possible before the floodgates of top open. If Saw Blade turret comes out fairly undamaged from the giant army that comes out from top, assuming you're around the 9-minute mark, you're golden. The rest should be simple enough, you'll be able to hold out long enough to reach the 10-minute mark. Which is good because the only two turrets past Saw Blade aren't very useful. One being the energy ball turret mentioned earlier, which is less useless and just more inconsistent, which goes against the goal of this video. The other one, and don't quote me on this, I think is supposed to drop time rifts. Because every now and then I see a stray time rift drop model that's not the time rift I'm firing off, but it doesn't go off. But that's that. Mission accomplished. Hope you all enjoyed the video and have a nice day.